Robert finally came to the realization that he needed to make a decisive choice. While the decision itself wasn't difficult, breaking the news to his wife would be the challenging part. He knew he had to summon the courage to confront the situation head-on and make the necessary changes. The time had come to end the charade. He could no longer tolerate the ongoing deception. Before delving into the current predicament, it's important to understand the background that led to this unfortunate situation. Robert's wife, Andrea, had been engaging in extramarital affairs for the past 2 years. Blunt as it may sound, this was the reality. Some might argue that Robert bears some responsibility for this situation, and they wouldn't be entirely wrong. Now, Andrea was pregnant with a child fathered by her Nigerian lover, Adam, with whom she had been intimately involved and even cohabitated at times. Andrea had expressed her deep affection for Adam on numerous occasions and eagerly anticipated their child's birth, leaving no doubt in Robert's mind about the paternity. Despite Andrea's infidelity, she continued to profess her love for Robert, and they maintained the facade of a normal family life in their shared home. However, as Andrea spent increasingly more time with Adam, maintaining appearances became increasingly challenging for Robert. He found himself making excuses for frequent absences to family and friends, struggling to reconcile his loyalty to Andrea with the harsh reality of her betrayal. Most nights, Robert found himself alone at home while Andrea spent her time with Adam. The question gnawed at him: could she still be considered his wife if she was spending most of her nights with another man? Deep down, Robert knew the answer, but he wrestled with his emotions and hesitated to take action. Initially, Robert had acquiesced to Andrea's requests to see other men outside their marriage, believing he could retain her love. Despite his deep affection for her, this arrangement left him feeling increasingly like a fool as time went on. He held on to hope that Andrea was the woman he could build a future with, despite her infidelity. Some might argue that granting permission for a spouse to see others negates the idea of cheating, calling it an open marriage. However, Andrea's insistence that Robert remain faithful to her while she pursued other relationships only added to his turmoil. She assured him that her extramarital affairs were temporary, dismissing them as a passing phase that would soon end. In essence, Robert found himself at a crossroads, torn between his enduring love for Andrea and the painful realization that their marriage had been irreparably fractured by her actions. Adam often stayed at Robert and Andrea's home for days at a stretch. During these times, Robert would sleep in the spare room, giving Adam and Andrea the main bedroom where they engaged in frequent sexual activity. The noise from their encounters became so unbearable that Robert often had to leave the house to escape the overwhelming jealousy building inside him. He knew he had to distance himself from them to prevent himself from doing something he might regret later. After these sessions, Andrea would emerge from the bedroom looking thoroughly satisfied, with disheveled hair and a blissful expression. She would attempt to be affectionate towards Robert, but it was evident that she relished the attention Adam had bestowed upon her. The scent of her lover lingered on her body, and traces of his ejaculate were sometimes visible on her thighs. Robert's capacity to be a loving husband was dwindling, though he kept his feelings to himself, hoping Andrea would start treating him with even a fraction of the affection she showed Adam. Instead, she would enthusiastically recount her love for Adam and describe how fulfilling it felt to be intimate with him. She would praise his physical attributes and express how he made her feel complete and desired. It became increasingly unbearable for Robert. As the months passed, Andrea became pregnant, thrilled at the prospect of carrying a child conceived outside her marriage, particularly by a man other than her husband. The thought seemed to excite her the most. Robert tried to reconcile himself with the idea of potentially becoming a father to a child not biologically his own. He wondered if Andrea would end her affair with Adam after the baby was born, allowing them to focus on their marriage. However, reality proved otherwise. Andrea spent even more time with Adam and less with Robert. On the rare occasions they discussed their future together, Andrea insisted they remain married and professed her love for Robert, albeit in a different manner than she did for Adam. She referred to Robert as her stability while Adam was her passion. This distinction finally prompted Robert to realize he deserved more than just stability as her husband. He wanted her passion as well. Ultimately, Robert decided he couldn't continue in this situation any longer. The baby arrived, a beautiful child despite not being Robert's biological offspring. It's crucial to clarify that children are innocent in such matters. They don't choose their parents, they simply receive them, for better or worse. Every child deserves love and care. That's the fundamental responsibility of parenthood. If one isn't ready to provide that, perhaps having children isn't the right choice. After the birth, Adam increasingly spent time at Robert and Andrea's home, almost as if he had moved in. Robert found himself shouldering much of the responsibility for caring for the baby, changing diapers, maintaining the house, cooking, essentially fulfilling the role of a father. Meanwhile, Adam, a minor league soccer player, focused on his fitness regimen at the gym and continued his relationship with Andrea, who primarily nursed the baby and little else. Andrea's infatuation with Adam, particularly his sexual prowess and the thrill of cheating without repercussions, grew. She even suggested Adam move in with them, an idea that deeply humiliated Robert. 3 months into this arrangement, Robert reached a breaking point. Adam must have sensed Robert's unspoken resentment because he decided to return to his own apartment, citing convenience for gym access and practice. Subsequently, Andrea and the baby spent the majority of their time with him. She openly professed her love for Adam to Robert daily, expressing eagerness to have another child with him. The situation led Robert to realize that his relationship with Andrea was no longer a marriage in any meaningful sense. They ceased being a family long ago when Andrea began her affair. Emotionally, she was committed to Adam, not to Robert. One day, Andrea returned home with the baby to gather belongings before heading back to Adam's apartment. Robert saw this as a chance to have a serious conversation without Adam present. He knew he was on the verge of a nervous breakdown if he didn't express his feelings and needs. This was his final opportunity to appeal to Andrea to come back and rebuild their family. He was even willing to accept the child as his own if she chose, but she had to choose between him and Adam. "Andrea, we need to talk," Robert said in a quiet but firm voice, his expression serious and determined. She didn't even glance at him when she replied, "What is it, sweetie?" He braced himself. "We need to discuss some very important matters about us, about our future." Turning to face her husband, she demanded, "What are you talking about? I'm your wife, you're my husband. What the hell is wrong with you now?" Robert knew he had to be direct. "Andrea, you're not truly my wife anymore. You belong to Adam now," he said firmly, surprising them both with the finality of his words. "Wait, hold on a minute. What are you saying?" Andrea's confusion was evident. Taking a deep breath, Robert continued, "Andrea, what defines us as a family?" Andrea looked perplexed, unsure where he was going with this. "The truth is, Andrea, we're not a family. You, Adam, and your baby, you're a family. You're planning to have another child with him. I have no place in your future. That choice was made when you got pregnant. What did you expect the outcome to be? Did you think you could have 2 husbands, one for babies and the other for other things?" Andrea was taken aback by his words, though deep down, she knew this arrangement of having 2 men at her beck and call couldn't last forever. Eventually, someone would tire of being second best. Robert pressed on, his voice tinged with sadness. "You need to decide, live with me, your husband, or move in with the father of your child. It's that simple. I thought I could share you with another man, but I can't. When you were so excited about being pregnant by him, I knew I had lost you. I always thought someday we'd have a family, but that dream ended with Adam." The hurt in Robert's eyes struck Andrea, who realized she had taken his loyalty for granted while planning her future with Adam. She sat in stunned silence. Robert continued, "Andrea, either come back home or move in with Adam. Most of your things are already at his place. I'll take the rest there today, and that will be it." Andrea spoke slowly, processing his ultimatum. "What will be done, Robert?" "You and I," he replied evenly. "It's over." "Just like that?" Her voice betrayed a mix of disbelief and resignation. Robert sighed. "I know it seems sudden, but I've been thinking about this since you told me about wanting another baby with Adam last week. Did you expect me to be a part-time father to your children forever? No, I can't live like that. I need a life too, Andrea. I need a wife who truly shares herself with me. But we married for better or worse. I married you, Andrea. I didn't marry Adam. If you love him and want to be with him, as you've said, then our marriage no longer exists. I want a divorce as soon as possible so you and Adam can marry and continue building your life together, having more children. Robert continued, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. Andrea, I did love you, or at least I thought I did. But I can't share you with him. You have to choose, him or me. It's as simple as that. With that, Robert stood up and headed to the bedroom to get a suitcase, telling Andrea she could take anything she wanted from the house. So, you're kicking me out? Andrea asked, hurt evident in her voice. No, dear, Robert replied sadly. You already left. You left when you chose another man over me, when you had his child, and when you said you wanted more children with him. Robert took off his wedding ring and handed it to her. I don't need this anymore. Heartbroken, Robert watched as Andrea quietly left the house and returned to Adam's apartment, hoping against hope that she might reconsider and come back to him. But she didn't. Later that day, Robert packed all of Andrea's belongings into his car and dropped them off at the door of Adam's apartment. He didn't want any further contact with either of them. Now, Robert focused on rebuilding his life. 3 months later, under the law, the husband is presumed to be the father of any child born during the marriage. Since Andrea had named Adam as the father on their baby's birth certificate, it was clear that Robert had no legal obligation for child support. He swiftly sold their house with the help of his lawyer, finalizing the divorce without delay. Andrea did not contest the proceedings, and as far as Robert was concerned, his life with her was over. Robert left his hometown and secured a new job in San Jose, California, part of Silicon Valley. He asked his family and friends not to disclose his new location to Andrea if she ever inquired, believing it was best for everyone to sever ties completely. With his new job came a promotion and a good income. Robert rented a small apartment that suited his needs and focused on improving himself. He committed to fitness, shedding 30 pounds, updating his wardrobe, getting laser eye surgery, and improving his smile with nearly invisible braces. A California tan boosted his confidence, giving him a renewed sense of self-esteem that he hadn't felt in years. Robert's social life wasn't his top priority, but being surrounded by women at work meant he often received invitations for drinks and dinners on Friday evenings without much effort. He started joining groups for TGIF gatherings, knowing these casual outings could lead to something more if he sent the right signals. Seeing a psychologist helped Robert understand why he had thought sharing his ex-wife with another man was acceptable. He learned he had a deep-seated need for approval, often going to great lengths to please women who paid attention to him. Unfortunately, this had included allowing his wife to be unfaithful. Acknowledging he had been a doormat and a fool, Robert vowed never to let it happen again. He developed coping strategies to recognize and avoid similar situations, focusing on reclaiming his life in a healthier way. 9 months later, while at work, Robert received a surprising call from the front desk informing him that a woman named Andrea was waiting to see him. Stunned, he cautiously asked for her last name, confirming it was indeed his ex-wife. He had deliberately cut off contact with Andrea after leaving Atlanta, wanting a clean break. She had moved on with a new family and life, and he had no interest in reconnecting. When Robert left, he had changed his phone number and strictly communicated through his lawyer, even during the house sale where she received her share of the money and most of their furniture. He had intended to erase all reminders of his past life with her. Now, Andrea had somehow tracked him down in Silicon Valley, likely due to gossip from his family, possibly his intrusive sister-in-law who had been specifically instructed not to disclose his whereabouts to Andrea. He had never expected Andrea to reach out, let alone show up on his doorstep after a year. If Andrea needed something from him, she could have her lawyer contact his. Robert couldn't help but wonder why she was in Silicon Valley and, more importantly, what she wanted from him now, a year later. He asked the receptionist who called, "Could you describe the woman, please?" He needed confirmation. The receptionist did, confirming it was indeed his ex-wife. Jesus! All right, I'll be down in a few minutes. Please give her a seat to wait. When he reached the building foyer, he immediately saw Andrea. She stood up, and he noticed she was heavily pregnant, likely 7 or 8 months along. He took a deep breath and greeted her. Andrea, I must say I'm surprised to see you here. What brings you to San Jose? Andrea almost didn't recognize the man she saw. It wasn't until he spoke that she realized it was Robert. He looked drastically different from a year ago, very handsome now. He was fit, had clearly lost weight, his upper body muscular and well-defined. He was impeccably dressed and groomed. She thought he resembled the actor Ryan Reynolds. Where had the old Robert gone? This one was remarkably transformed. Robert, I need to talk to you, Andrea said. Before you say anything else, follow me so we can talk privately. He led her to a conference room on the next floor, with glass walls indicating whether a meeting was in progress, but offering sufficient privacy with its thick glass and heavy door. They sat down, keeping a respectful distance. Andrea, whatever you need to discuss, why didn't you handle it through your lawyer? You didn't need to come all this way, Robert started. What I need to talk to you about isn't something I want to discuss through a lawyer, Andrea replied. Robert raised his hand to interrupt. Wait, if this is about money, you received your fair share from the house sale. I don't owe you anything more. Your husband is responsible for supporting you and your babies, he gestured towards her large belly. That's what I want to talk about, Robert. He's not my husband, Andrea said. Well, whatever he is, it's not my concern. You chose to leave me for him. You decided you loved him enough to have his child and to plan for more. So, it seems you've got what you wanted. Whatever your situation with him is now, it's none of my business. We're divorced, Andrea, plain and simple. With that, Andrea burst into tears, sobbing heavily as she tried to speak. Robert, I was so wrong, sob, to leave you for him, sob, he left me, sob, and now I'm pregnant, sob even harder. Oh, for God's sake. Robert found a box of tissues and slid it across the table to Andrea. She quickly grabbed a handful and blew her nose. Clearly very pregnant, she mentioned her frequent need to use the bathroom due to the baby pressing on her bladder. Oh, sure, Robert thought, pointing to a private washroom adjacent to the conference room. A few minutes later, Andrea returned, slightly more composed but still sniffling and wiping her nose. Andrea, I'm sorry things didn't work out with Adam, but that's really none of my business, Robert began. You should talk to him about supporting his children. Maybe have your lawyer pursue child support and spousal support since you're taking care of them. My lawyer is already working on getting money from him to help support my children, Andrea replied. But I need a husband, I need you. Robert was taken aback. He hadn't expected Andrea to come all the way from Atlanta to San Jose to tell him this. But what did she think he was going to do? Why are you here? I'm not running a matchmaking service. There are plenty of those back east. You're a beautiful woman who could easily attract many men. Sign up for eHarmony or something, Robert said frankly. Once she composed herself, Andrea shared details about her current life. Adam was a minor league professional soccer player. While not making much money, the team treated players well, inflating their egos. Soccer's growing popularity in the U.S. added to their sense of importance. Adam's athletic image and physical attributes pleased Andrea, especially since he professed his love and convinced her to have a baby, consequences be damned. She had believed Robert loved and needed her so much that he would tolerate anything. Adam's frequent travels for games kept him away from home for extended periods. When he was around, his focus was solely on sex with Andrea, leaving childcare entirely to her. Despite his shortcomings as a husband and father, Andrea remained infatuated. She referred to him as her husband, though they weren't legally married. After spending a couple of days with Andrea, Adam would socialize with his teammates at pubs, drinking heavily. Outside of this, he devoted considerable time to the gym. His routine consisted of sex, working out, drinking, and more sex upon returning home. When Adam failed to contribute financially to the baby's care, Andrea began to see where his priorities lay. To him, she mattered for her physical attributes and sexual availability. Adam was initially excited by their affair because Andrea was married, which aroused him, especially if the husband knew she was involved with a well-endowed black man. Andrea openly flaunted her marital status, expressing her husband's alleged approval of her extramarital encounters, particularly with a black man. Her desire to humiliate her husband stemmed from his perpetual niceness and willingness to concede to her every whim. She pushed him to his breaking point, leading to their divorce. Andrea eventually discovered that Adam was also involved with other women while away on road games, fathering 2 children with different women. He hadn't disclosed any of this to her. Reflecting on her actions, she admitted her foolishness and neglect of consequences. "What do I do now, Robert? You were the only man who ever loved me. We were together for 4 years. Robert raised his hand to cut her off. "Yeah, but you cut me off when you got involved with Adam, Andrea. I didn't feel like you cared for me much after that. The last time we were really husband and wife was 3 years ago. Even before Adam, you were cheating on me. When I found out, you made me feel inadequate, saying my size didn't satisfy you, that you needed a bigger cock. Then you told me you loved me. I was naive, but I'm not that man anymore. Go home and move on with your life. I'll do the same." Robert's voice rose towards the end of his outburst, and he reminded himself to calm down. He walked to the conference room door and opened it. "It's time for you to leave, Andrea." "Time to go home," he said, holding the door open for her. Andrea slowly stood up, wiping her nose again. "My flight is tomorrow, so I need to find a place to stay tonight." "What the hell? Why did you come here at all? Jesus. Wait here for a moment, please." Robert approached one of the administrative assistants in his department and asked her to call a hotel near the airport to reserve a room for Andrea, which he would pay for. He also requested a cab to pick her up from the building's entrance. A few minutes later, he returned to the conference room where Andrea was waiting. "Okay, you have a room booked at the Marriott by the airport, and a cab will take you there. Go home, Andrea." As Robert turned to leave, Andrea made one last plea. "Please, sweetie, I really need to talk to you tonight. Just call me, please." Tears welled up again as she handed him a piece of paper with her cell phone number. The administrative assistant, a tall, slim, and well-dressed young woman of about 25, was also very curious about the pregnant woman speaking with Robert in the conference room. She escorted Andrea back to the building's foyer and ensured she safely got into the cab. Making conversation as they walked, she asked, "How do you know Robert?" "He's a really nice guy and quite handsome, but he's very quiet. Some of us have been trying to get him to join us for drinks on Fridays after work, but he's kept to himself since he started here. We'd love to get to know him better." She smiled warmly, tucking her hair behind her ears. Andrea arrived at the hotel and checked in, finding out that the room had already been paid for. With the key card in hand, she wasted no time getting to her room, feeling the baby pressing on her bladder and needing to pee urgently. As she settled in, she pondered how to make Robert listen to her and what she could do to win him back. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel not to miss new videos.